we'll do is, so we'll go,
Sorry.
that's great. We'll go around and do self-introductions, if you don't mind, since we'll do it. And I'm Dennis Harder, and the current chair, and represent Sonoma County Alliance.
Would you like me to read the names?
Yes, then why don't you take it from there, Drew?
Yeah, absolutely. So I see John Bly from Engineering Contractors Association.
Hi, everybody.
I'm Drew Nichols with SCTA RCPA. Next is on my screen is Ross Clendenin here with SCTA. Dana Teray here with SCTA. Shauna Gauze, SCTA. David Raperda, SCTA. Brian Ling with the 4th District. We have a guest with Tool Design, Quinn Kelly. Tanya Narath with RCPA. Mark Soyland from the 2nd District. Janet Spillman with SCTA. Chris Barney with SCTA. Willard Richards with the Sonoma County Transportation and Land Use Coalition. Steve Bertelbaugh with the Sierra Club. Tom Banning with the 3rd District. Kathleen Cortez with the Area Agency on Aging. Musa Abbasi with the Santa Rosa Chamber. Tom Conlin with the Sonoma County Conservation Coalition. Sophia Goulet with Tool Design. Larry Zimmer with the City of Healdsburg. David Oster with the 1st District. Rick Lutman with the League of Women Voters of Sonoma County. We have Tracy Beards with Area Agency on Aging, as I see on her list. And then Jennifer Wolf. I'm not taking action for, which I can't quite see the rest. Have I missed anyone? Oh, Chair Harder, I think we're
Very good. Well done. Thank you. Next item on our agenda is to vote to continue to meet as via Zoom. And you can read in the agenda exactly that it's a requirement to go ahead and have this motion to be in effect. So can I have a motion to have such action?
So
I move we continue to meet virtually.
Then I'll
Second.
second. Mark, maybe.
All in favor, raise your hand, please. All opposed? Any abstains? All right, it passes. And public comment moving forward, as I understand, there's been no public comment that was received. And is there any public comment that is from any of the participants? Hearing none, I'll assume there's no more. Moving right ahead to the administrative items. The approval of the November 29th minutes. Has anyone had an opportunity to review them?
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Musa. Is there a
I'll second that. I'll second that, Tom Conlon.
Sounds great. All in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Abstentions? All right, passes. Next to the most exciting item on the agenda is the officer elections and chair. And I've had this opportunity to be on this committee for quite a few years. And it's probably time for maybe to let some other people have that opportunity to be the chair. And from that, I'm going to be stepping down from chair, and I'd like to make a nomination, if I may. And then we'll open it up to other nominations. So I'd like to nominate John Bly to succeed me. He's been on this committee for many years and has been attuned to it. So I'd like to nominate John Bly as the upcoming chair.
I'll second
Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, and without any further discussions, can we take a vote to see if we'll approve John Bly as the incoming chair for the CAC? All in favor, raise your hand. Any nays? Any oppositions? Any with abstentions? None? Oh, there, except for John. Okay, John.
I guess I should abstain.
Very good. All right, John, you get to have the gavel as we're moving forward here. I will go ahead and, do you want to take the meeting from here? Or would you like me to do, we'll do a vice chair?
I'm fine taking the meeting. We do need a vice chair. So if you would like to make a motion, Dennis, I lean on you for your expertise, your institutional knowledge. If you have somebody in mind for the vice chair, I'll give you first crack at making a motion for that.
I would, Musa has been with us for a long time and has had great experience and input. So I would recommend Musa.
I would,
I'll second that.
okay, so that was a motion and a second. Is there any other nominations? Musa, you okay with that?
Yeah, I'll be glad, to serve as a vice chair.
Okay, great. All those in favor of Musa as vice chair, raise your hands.
I'll elect myself.
Any opposition to Musa? And seeing none, any abstentions? All right. One abstention was Willard.
Okay, thank you.
All right, well, thank you. Pleased to be able to serve this august committee, and been here for, I don't know, 10 years or so. Seen as the minutes reported, we're kind of in a lull, if you will, if there is ever such a thing for this committee in between Measure M and the Go Sonoma Act. However, we do have some informational items, and Drew, do I drop kick that over to you for the Measure M project presentation for the city of Healdsburg?
And then I'll pass that over to Shauna.
Thank you,
Oh,
Drew.
Deshaun, thank you.
So as we do every month, Mr. Chair, we try to bring you a project sponsor that receives Measure M funding so that they can present all of the information on how they're spending their funding in a given fiscal year. We don't generally present on the apportionment programs. We ask them to present on the project specific programs. And today we have with us Larry Zimmer and Clay Thistle from the city of Healdsburg, who will be presenting on the Foss Creek Trail project. With that, I would hand it over to Clay, who I think is going to kick it off.
Sure, Clay Thistle, city of Healdsburg, senior engineer. Just going to present to you the Foss Creek pathway segments 7 and 8. I'm excited to present to you, that we have completed the project and it's fully being used. So I know. So I'm going to share my screen with you guys here shortly and kind of run through some things. Just one moment.
Is it not sharing, Clay?
No, I was actually having trouble, Larry. I see all
Drew,
my.
does he have authorization to share? Does he need to be?
Yeah, I have this all set for participants to share.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I have access to share too. I don't have the full PowerPoint, but if you'd like, Clay, I can jump into the fun part.
I'll try and run through a couple things first, just kind of without the graphics. And I apologize. So the Foss Creek pathway is a class 1 off-street paved bike and pedestrian pathway. The city of Healdsburg completed phases 1 through 8 from the at-grade railroad crossing at Front Street near the west bank of the Russian River, approximately 2.5 over 2.5 miles all the way up to the Healdsburg Avenue and Grove Street, just past the community center. There is a future planned phase 9 that would extend the pathway limits a little bit further to the city limits at the north. So far, those 8 phases have been completed, starting as early back in 2006 was phase 1, and then up to our current phase 7 and 8, completed here and opened in October of 2021. Brief summary of funds. So overall, to these various pieces of pathway, Measure M has completed, contributed $3.25 million, city funds of 2.7 for approximately $7 million being spent on these pathway portions. The recent pathway portion, the segments 7 and 8, it was awarded in September of 2020. A notice to proceed in October of 2020. So we issued a notice to proceed just for procurements headed into that winter. There was a prefabricated bridge component that could be put on order, traffic signal components, streetlights, etc. Construction began April 5th, 2021, with the pathway opening October 30th, 2021. The construction contract bid was $2.6 million. There was construction contract change orders of $113,000 for a total project delivery of $2.7 million. Just kind of going over where some of those change order items came up during construction. We had anticipated that closing of the pathway would not impact residents, and we really underestimated the utilization of the pathway throughout Healdsburg. So we were able to create a temporary bypass around the pathway to keep it open during construction, which really paid off. We were working atop of the Santa Rosa's geysers pipeline, so we ran into a couple conflicts with the pipeline that we needed to some change order work. Additional storm drain, some additional slope protection. That early storm in October, we did have to do a little bit of cleanup work. And then there was some miscellaneous items for approximately $113,000 in change orders. There were just some of the project elements or some of the construction challenges. The project did include a new traffic signal crossing Dry Creek Road. So one of our busiest thoroughfares in Healdsburg, Dry Creek Road, the pathway runs along the rail corridor, and we installed a new traffic signal to aid in pedestrians and bicyclists crossing over Dry Creek Road. There were environmentally sensitive areas, so we had permit restrictions, not allowing entry into these areas until June 15th. Again, we were working atop the Santa Rosa geysers pipeline. There was a 40-foot prefab steel bridge and a 80-foot prefab steel bridge that were to be installed. And then just the challenges of working in the smart NCRA right away. Just kind of a breakdown of the funding. I'm sorry that I can't show you this on the slide. I'll try and work to get that happening. Just total construction costs, including right-of-way, environmental design, construction, and construction management, came to approximately $3.3 million. Of the total $3.3 million, there was funding from a developer contribution of $86,000, parks capital of $125,000, gas tax of $650,000. The city's local tax measure, Measure V, now Measure T, contributed approximately $650,000. And then thank you to the Measure M contribution of $1.84 million for a total of $3.3 million. I apologize again for not being able to show you the slides, but I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Larry, who's going to show you some of the photos, more of the fun elements. Go ahead, Larry.
And Larry, you're
Did we lose
unmute.
him? Did we lose him? Oh, there we go. Oh, you're on mute, Larry.
Sorry about that. You think I'd never been on Zoom before. So we had a ribbon cutting recently, and it started with a fun run and walk. And this was one of the groups from an earlier segment of Foss Creek Pathway. Here are some segments of the new pathway. You can see in use with our brand new wayfinding signs. Here is a segment of the prefab bridge that, or one of the two prefab bridges that Clay was referring to. And here it is in place with our Measure M funding sign. One of the big additions of this project was crossing of Dry Creek Road. And unfortunately, our overall map was part of Clay's presentation. So if anyone wants, I could quickly jump to Google Maps after this, but this is really critical because it is a mid-block crossing with a push button, full controlled signal. And so now the pedestrians can cross one of our busiest streets to continue on the path. And our fun run ended with a ribbon cutting and the balloon arch, which was pretty fun. There is all kinds of informational things. We had food and Senator McGuire and our then Mayor Mitchell speaking. There was some excitement about a potential link to the Great Redwood Trail in the future. And there is Clay in the left corner and me trying to grab the glory on the right corner. And in the center is one of our residents who relies on this path as a means of transportation. She is unable to drive and she rides this tricycle. And as Clay referred to, that change order was instigated by her need to be able to use the trail to get to work and to get around town. So it was wonderful that we were able to do that. And with that, I will stop sharing. And if there are any questions.
I'd like to see the map.
Okay. I have that ready. Are we all seeing that now?
Yes.
Excellent. So as I think we all know the roundabout, if you can see my cursor down at the bottom of the screen, the path actually starts all the way down here at Front Street, runs along Foss Creek. If you can see my little cursor, the green strip here, and then it runs all the way up to currently, or before this project, it terminated at our skate park. But the path now, while it does connect to Grove Street at the skate park, continues along. Here is Dry Creek Road where you saw that crossing, and goes all the way up to our community center. And so the event was being held right here. And so now it ties into up to Grove Street up here with some plans for future extensions. And sorry, we didn't have the original graphics. Clay can send that along to Drew and they can get it out to you through email. My apologies again.
Larry, are there any segments that have not been 100% completed at this point?
Well, it doesn't quite make it to city limits on the south end and the north end. But from where it starts to where it ends, it is continuous. It's in really good shape. We're going to add some benches and water fountains and things like that to segment 7 and 8 in the near future as we start getting funds. We have a couple of issues with the very north and very south segment that we're working on. And those will be moving forward in time.
But Larry, this completes everything that was included in Measure M when Measure M was passed in 2005.
Exactly. We have done several segments, and this project was completed in full, the entire scope of work.
So
Thank
we
you for
have,
that, Shauna.
of course, yeah, no, it's a success for Measure M. It's a fully delivered project for Measure M, which is really pretty exciting. There are, we have a number of projects that go through phases, and this one did as well. There were a number of segments that were funded early on, and then there were some segments that were funded with developer fees and that sort of thing. And then this was the last segment. And so this is a fully delivered Measure M project. That's really exciting news.
That's
And
awesome.
you should all come out and walk it someday.
Are there bicycle restrictions as to speed? I mean, now you've got electric bikes and all that stuff. How fast can the bikes go on that path? And what signage do we have out there to protect the walkers?
We currently do not have specific signage for speed limit on bikes. It has been a discussion because the city is also working on a e-bike share program. And so that was one of the concerns. One of the things we can do with the bike shares is we can actually control the speed if we need to. But we're going to do a little bit more of a wait and see, because we don't want to add more signs and more restrictions if it's not a problem. And we don't have a lot of problem with people riding their bikes too fast on the pathway currently. So it's going to be a little bit of a wait and see.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is a great project. It's good to see. I'm down in the South County in Sonoma, so I don't get up there very much. But I know we have a crosstown bike trail, rail trail conversion project in Sonoma that gets a tremendous amount of traffic. And in one section of it, right through downtown, we actually have a congestion problem now. There's so many dog walkers, so many walkers, and so many bikes that we probably don't have a wide enough path through that segment. So I wonder, one, are you seeing any of that kind of congestion in the downtown center? And two, do you have any other auxiliary support equipment planned? Like we've had a tire changing station installed at our library. We have a few other kinds of and bike lock facilities in high traffic areas. Just curious to hear you talk about those additional features.
Well, to the first question, we have not had congestion issues. The path is extremely well used, but it's, it's 10 foot wide plus some shoulders. So it doesn't tend to be a problem. The serious cyclists usually stay off of it. And that, they'll stay on the street. We do have some bike repair stations along the path, the previous phases of the path. We may extend them on the new segments in the future. And they're pretty well used. We have, I think, about 3 of them in town, and 2 of them, I believe, are on the path, and 1 is just in our downtown area. Where the path crosses the major streets, we haven't had any incidents, but that is an area of conflict when there's a lot of people going across and a lot of vehicles at the same time. The crossing I showed you is interesting because it isn't on demand, because as you know, if every time someone pushed a button, the light would turn red for the drivers and you were at a high volume time with the vehicles, that could cause quite a bit of problems. So it's actually timed after you push that button so that the light turns green for the pedestrians on a proper cycle so that the vehicles don't back up on Dry Creek. So that's great for the pedestrians, sometimes a little bit of complaints for the drivers, but again, we haven't had any major issues. It's a well-loved, well-used path that really goes the entire limits of our city now and gets a lot of people off the road.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Clay. And
Great job, guys.
great
Thank
job
you.
on the leveraging of Measure M funds, because the bike ped program does not require a match. And so they brought $1.5 million to that project that wasn't required, but I mean, was required in order to deliver, but you can see the power of Measure M. So that is just a big success story.
I'm encouraged by the low dollars of change orders too. I mean, by putting in a temporary bypass and so forth, that's a pretty minor amount of unanticipated dollars for construction. So good job to, I guess that was Regi out there, not an ECA member. They need to get him be a member. But good job to them as well. So thank you, guys. And I've got next is the review the draft for fiscal year 2021 Measure M annual report. And
That's
who do
me
I-
again, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Shauna.
So I'm going to go ahead and try to share my screen. Make sure I do this properly. Share. And then go to this one. There we go. Am I on the right one, Drew?
Display settings.
Display settings, it is.
You're on the other one.
Okay, there we go.
Now, there we go.
Okay, thank you. So today, oh, I gotta move this because that is in the way. All right. Sorry about that. Oh, no, now you can see that. That's no good either. All right, I'm just gonna, there we go. All right. Sorry, just a little bit of logistical issues. So the Measure M annual report is presented to the Citizens Advisory Committee for review and recommendation of approval each fiscal year. The CAC was presented with a draft in November of last year, and the comments were addressed in the final draft. I want to take you through some of the highlights of the document that is included in your agenda packet today via link. And there was an update sent out just this afternoon. So hopefully everyone got that and had a chance to look that over. And we are also debuting our updated logo, which will allow staff to help transition stakeholders and residents from Measure M to Go Sonoma. So you can see that down here on the bottom. So Measure M was enacted in 2005 and will expire in 2025. It is a quarter-cent sales tax for transportation, and Measure M is expected to exceed $30 million annually in 2022. The measure is currently at about 96% of total revenue forecast, which is good. We're up for this year, also good. As many of you are aware, there are 6 primary categories in Measure M: project categories and apportionment categories. The apportionment category includes local streets rehabilitation, which is 20% worth 20% of the measure, and local bus transit, which is worth 10% of the measure. And the project specific programs category includes Highway 101, which was 40% of the measure, local street projects, which was 20% of the measure, bicycle and pedestrian projects, which was 4% of the measure, and rail, which was 5% of the measure. Finally, administration of the entire measure is limited to 1%. The apportionment programs disperse funds directly to the jurisdictions based on 50% road miles, 50% population formula for the local streets rehabilitation program, and on the current Transit Development Act, also known as TDA formula for the local bus transit program, but that does exclude Golden Gate Transit. Here you can see some of the photos that were submitted by the jurisdictions depicting how Measure M LSR funds were spent. So on the bottom left here and the top left, you see improvements being made. It looks like a slurry seal and an overlay of Olive at Barnett and West 3rd Street at Brockhurst. You see restriping in unincorporated Sonoma County. You can see bike lanes and sidewalks that were constructed on South Cloverdale Boulevard in Cloverdale. Updated grade crossing at Sherman Street and Healdsburg Avenue. And then 2 pavement overlay photos in the city of Petaluma. these are the types of things that are submitted when the jurisdictions complete their annual reporting letters each year. So local bus transit funding goes towards operations and is a key source for ongoing service because of the stable and predictable nature of Measure M. Particularly during the shutdown, Measure M provided revenue when fare revenue dropped to unprecedented levels. The Bicycle and Pedestrian Projects Program includes funding for specific projects, and included here are photos of the construction of the last segments of Foss Creek Trail, segments 7 and 8, which we just heard about earlier from Healdsburg's update. Highway 101 is another project-specific program in Measure M. You can see here 2 locations under construction in the C2 segment of Petaluma. The project was able to make major advancements early in the pandemic when traffic levels dropped due to the stay-at-home order. If the project stays on schedule, the southbound lane should be open by the end of 2022. And you can see here that this photo is showing you the overhead over the smart rail. And this photo on the bottom right is showing you the widening of the Washington Creek Bridge along Highway 101. And that is the northbound lanes, I believe. Local Streets Projects Program, also known as LSP, funded advancement of 3 projects this year: design and right-of-way for the 116-121 intersection improvements, construction of phase 1A of the Airport Avenue improvements, and design of the Hearn Avenue interchange improvements. Our immediate past chair asked me to give you a little bit of an update on Hearn Avenue, so I'm going to do that here. The Hearn Avenue interchange project is funded with Measure M and city funds through the design and right-of-way phases, and has submitted 100% design plans to Caltrans for approval. The project does not currently have funding for the construction phase. The city applied for federal grant funding unsuccessfully 3 times, known under the acronyms BUILD and RAISE, and they might have actually applied under TIGER as well, but I don't know. All of those are acronyms for the same program, essentially. The project was also submitted as a candidate for the SCTA 2021 funding program, and staff is working with the city on additional funding sources. SCTA staff will be encouraging the city to apply for SB1 Local Partnership Competitive Program monies to complete the funding plan. Finally, the rail program did not have any appropriations this fiscal year, as SMART is still paying back an interprogram loan with revenues collected for the rail program. So what's next? Measure M will end revenue collection on March 31st, 2025, as I mentioned at the beginning, and Go Sonoma will begin collecting revenue on April 1st of 2025. In the years between now and then, SCTA will complete another Measure M strategic plan and begin work on the Go Sonoma strategic plan. In addition, SCTA staff intends to start programming funding into projects as part of the 2021 funding program in the years in which Go Sonoma will be available, which is 25-26 and 26-27. And that's the end of my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions about the presentation or about the document itself if you have any.
This is Dennis. Oops. I'm not sure if I'm recognized or not, but anyway, here I am. The questions are 2 things. One is that, first of all, great job, great presentation as always. And the questions about Local Streets project and Hearn specifically, there's funds available in Measure M for local streets and roads. So what happens if we haven't got the funding for Hearn, but there's funds left over? Will that project roll over to Go Sonoma?
So I suppose it could. We're hoping it will be funded before then, because as you are aware, the Go Sonoma is not a project specific measure, whereas Measure M was. So we will be accepting applications for funding projects and programs in a different way, and that will come out as part of the development of the strategic plan. But we expect to spend Measure M dollars on Measure M projects. So you're right, there's quite a bit of funding left in the LSP program, and we're anticipating that HERN is going to use a significant portion of it, more than what was originally identified for HERN. It will take a board action, but it has already been approved in concept by the board to do that, to shift the funding. When other construction funds are identified, we will then make the action to move that other funding. So we have talked about with the board identifying about $10 million of other LSP funding that probably wouldn't move forward on other projects that we know aren't moving forward, and shift that over to Hearn Avenue.
Such as our Farmers Lane, $10 million original Measure M. So stuff like that, we could shift and put those funds in theory towards this project to get it moving. Okay.
That's right.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Shauna, is that shifting of funds a function of the oversight of this committee? In other words, as we get near to the handoff, if you will, to Go Sonoma Act versus Measure M, and Hearn hasn't moved forward, does staff make a recommendation to this committee and we have oversight of that allocation process?
This committee is tasked with oversight of Measure M. So yes, it would absolutely come through this committee for a recommendation, which would then be paired with staff recommendation to go to the board on any action that is required. The LSP, all of the programs require that we look at if a project is determined to not be viable, for not moving forward for whatever reason. There are a number of reasons that are identified in the measure for why a project wouldn't move forward. If it falls under one of those categories, then we are tasked with identifying where to shift those funds within that program. So they have to stay inside their silo. So they have to stay, any funds that are not spent, let's say on Farmers Lane, could be shifted to something else in LSP, in the local streets projects program. It wouldn't be, you can't shift it to bike ped, you can't shift it to rail, you can't shift it to 101. It has to be within that LSP category. But yes, it would absolutely come through the Citizens Advisory Committee before it went to the board.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
If Mr. Lutman has his hand up.
Yes, thank you. Regarding the Hearn Avenue overcrossing project, I've noticed that often on southbound 101 between Highway 12 and Hearn Avenue, there's a lot of congestion buildup. And it seems to me it's because the traffic isn't getting off fast enough. Is this project going to alleviate that problem?
It is meant to, yes.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Maybe Shauna. So I'm looking for a definition of the local streets project, because I know that one of the reasons Hearn's had trouble qualifying is that the definition of a complete local street is a bit in flux since Measure M was first defined. So I'm just wondering what that specific definition is that allows that would allow those funds to be either transferred or limited in their transfer.
Okay, I'm going to try to answer your question. I think I'm parsing it, but I'm not positive.
I grabbed the old Measure M report, the annual report, and I didn't see it readily as far as a definition. So that's why I'm asking.
So I would point you to, and this is probably not going to show up on my screen if I hold it up in front of me, but I would point you to the strategic plan, which is a slightly larger document. And inside that strategic plan are two appendices. The second appendix is the actual measure. That is where LSP, the local streets projects, are defined.
Right.
And so over the term of the measure, things have been in flux, but we are held to what was identified in the measure for what is eligible for funding. We've come through that a couple of times when there have been questions about what we could spend money on for bike ped, or if we could spend, how can we move the MUP along with rail money and that sort of thing. And everything is defined in the measure. That's what we use as our guide. And James has helpfully put a link to it in the chat. So thank you, James. I'm sorry, I can't see everyone at the moment because I'm not.
I'm looking as well. I don't see any hands up. What is the process now after we vote on this draft, Shauna? Where does it go from here?
It will go to.
And when?
Thank you so much. So the Measure M annual report has been drafted. If the Citizens Advisory Committee recommends it for approval, it will go to the board on February 14th for their final approval. Then we will have them printed and distributed as we do it annually. And I'm not hearing anything that is specific about the report itself. We did run the draft through the committee and answer a number of questions and comments as part of that process in November. And the committee did choose not to have a special meeting in December because they felt like the issues that had been brought up were addressed. So hopefully this version meets with their approval.
I will say that was very helpful. I'm not sure how we'd be managing this task without having seen it in November. It's quite voluminous.
John, we are looking for a motion to approve the draft,
I was just ready to go there. I was just given a pregnant pause here to see if there was any other comments.
I move we approve the draft as presented.
I'll
Thank you,
second.
Mr. Lane. Thank you, Mosa. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by raising your hand. All those opposed, raise your hand. Seeing none, and any abstentions, raise your hand. Well done, Shauna. Good job. Thank you very much. And we are on to Vision Zero Action Plan. I'm not mistaken, or no, pardon me. I missed financial statements, sales tax update, and California forecast.
Included in your packet, as it is monthly, the financial statements, both from our EFS, which is our enterprise financial system, are included, as well as in Excel format. So it's more of a tabular format that's easier to digest. Those of you who like the numbers. I also included our quarterly newsletter that we received from HDL, who's a consultant that helps us with projecting our sales tax revenue. You'll see some quarter-over-quarter comparisons based on industry group. General consumer goods continues to perform well with online sales, as well as people spending money on things as opposed to services, which does generate sales tax. And also included in the packet is more recent than that Q3 quarterly report, which we just received, is the December 21 California forecast put together by HDL. With that, this is just information for the CAC to show our financials as well as our sales tax revenue. And with that, I would just answer any questions that the committee may have.
I have a question, James, if you may. Like our sales tax revenue, is it within the state, average, or below, what, as a percentage increase,
Right. So no, we're exceeding it. So we're doing better than the state average and better than most counties. And it really has to do with those online sales of the general consumer good, where the sales tax is attributed to that point of sale location where people are buying things.
Thank you.
Economy type question, James. Do you think some of the reason the sales tax measure or sales tax is exceeding the state forecasting is still follow up on rebuilding from the fire, or do you think that's of minimal impact?
You know, that's a tough one to know for sure. I mean, I'm looking at the report I just sent out where so the business and industry group and the building and construction group, you know, there's still growth there. But if I had to guess based on the 2017, you know, fire and the rebuilds that are going, I believe it has more to do with the pandemic spending than any sort of rebuilding efforts that are still afoot.
And I think that was Eiler's conclusion the last time he looked at that and addressed it publicly as well. Thank you. Any other questions? These were just informational packets that James and staff were nice enough to provide us. Appreciate that. And seeing none, we'll move on to what I tried to get into a few minutes ago, Vision Zero Action Plan. Item 6.
Hi, that's my item. Nice to see you all. The Vision Zero project has been in the works for 2 years now, over 2 years. It started with the Caltrans Sustainable Communities Grant in 2019 in partnership with the Department of Health Services. It's gone through some ups and downs because it was a Department of Health Services project initially, with the SCTA doing the data dashboard. But with COVID, DHS had other things to do, and it languished for a little bit, and it's back up and in full steam. And SCTA has taken over some parts of it, including the Vision Zero Action Plan. And so with the help of our consultants, Tool Design, and MIG Consulting, we've done a lot of outreach and now have a draft action plan. I'm going to let Quinn tell you about the plan and about Vision Zero in a minute, but I'd like to say that we've had a tremendous amount of public outreach before the lockdown and since. There have been many different kinds of meetings. And most recently, there was a public workshop that was promoted heavily on local radio. So maybe you may have heard it there. The draft plan will be brought to the SCTA on February 14th, and then back again on March 14th for final adoption. And then from there, it will go on, hopefully with the support of our board members and of our champions, to all of the cities and the county government for their adoption and implementation. And with that, I turn it over to Quinn for his presentation.
Great, thank you, Janet. Just start this. All right. Yeah, so it's great to be with you all today. Been excited to come before this committee. I feel like we've been working on this for a long time, but it's actually only been a few months. So yeah, why Vision Zero? So you know, every year people in Sonoma County lose friends, families, neighbors, colleagues to preventable crashes on our roads. From 2016 to 2020, as you can see, crashes killed 176 people and left almost 1,000 more with life-changing injuries. So this map shows the location of every fatal crash in 2020 by travel mode. And so you can see, you know, it's a big number, and it's also, you know, all of these are individuals with, you know, families and stories. And Vision Zero, we want we want to tell those stories so we can make a case for how to fix this. So just to sort of compare and contrast Vision Zero with the more what we're calling the traditional approach to traffic safety. So Vision Zero starts with the idea that severe and fatal crashes are not something we should accept as inevitable, and nor do they affect all communities equally. Human drivers are imperfect, and we have to plan for that. Vision Zero focuses on fatal and severe crashes rather than property damage only crashes. And it emphasizes collective responsibility through a safe systems approach. These are the top 4 crash factors in Sonoma County based on an analysis of every crash report for the last 5 years. So we're really using these to inform the recommendations in the plan. So, impaired driving, we're talking about addressing drug and alcohol abuse, providing transportation options, keeping impaired drivers from getting behind the wheel. Unsafe turns, we're talking about street design, intersection, signal design that can help reduce the incidence of these type of crashes. Unsafe speed, this is a huge one. So, higher speeds increase both the risk of a crash and the likelihood that a crash will result in severe injury or death. Right-of-way violations, we're thinking about driver education, signage, and roadway design to help reduce some of these conflicts and resulting crashes. So I also want to say, as Janet said, this is a partnership with the Department of Health. And so we're really taking a public health approach here, trying to address the root causes of traffic injuries and deaths rather than just the symptoms. I want to really bring home that point about speed. There's a lot of measures in here designed to address speeding. As you can see, a vehicle traveling 20 miles an hour that hits someone has a 10% chance of killing or severely injuring them, compared to 70% for a vehicle traveling at 40. So this is the Sonoma County High Injury Network. It was created through a systematic analysis of all of the crashes throughout the past 5 years and trying to identify those road network characteristics that were most correlated with fatal and severe injury crashes. And this is really used to identify areas where safety investments should be prioritized. So yeah, there's 209 miles of roadway and 98 intersections spread throughout the county. As Janet alluded to, there's been a lot of public engagement, including a survey that happened last September and November with nearly 2,500 community members sharing their feelings about traffic safety. So here you can see the top responses for when folks were asked about what the most important traffic safety issues facing Sonoma County. So we had poorly maintained roads, bike lanes, and sidewalks, speeding, and distracted driving as the top 3. And so, again, we've used this feedback to include specific goals and actions designed to address these issues. And consistent with Vision Zero principles, this plan really delves into the equity implications of traffic deaths and severe injuries. So we examined the inequitable access to transportation and housing that results in disparities in crash victims across race, socioeconomic status, travel mode, and geography. Because many neighborhoods in Sonoma County are low density with few jobs and destinations in walking distance and limited access to public transportation, most households have to drive. And for people who can't afford to drive or prefer not to, using the county's walking, bicycling, and transit networks presents other challenges. So we drew a lot also on the listening sessions that were done as part of SCTA's recent comprehensive transportation plan, where participants really identified a strong need for better walking and cycling facilities, as well as expanded public transportation services. We also want to acknowledge how different communities are affected unequally by traffic enforcement. A lot of folks don't even report crashes for fear of interacting with law enforcement, and others are disproportionately burdened by the penalties and fines that come with that enforcement. And And so this map you can see here, this plan uses spatial analysis to show the correlation between Sonoma County's most dangerous roadways and its most underserved communities, and tries to identify strategies to address those disparities. So with that, I'm going to get into the goals and actions. So based on what we heard from the public and key stakeholders, we proposed a prioritized set of actions across these 6 major goals that you see here. So the first one is creating safer speeds. So this is a key element of any Vision Zero effort. Over the past 5 years, speeding drivers caused 4,000 crashes, leading to over 200 serious injuries and 29 deaths throughout the county. And it's important to note that high-speed roads, regardless of whether the driver is traveling above the limit, are a risk factor. Travel speeds of 40 to 45 miles an hour see a notably elevated rate of fatal and severe injury crashes relative to lower speeds. So here are a couple of our actions designed to combat speeding. So reviewing speed limits and implementing traffic calming and other design changes to lower the design speed of roadways and help drivers naturally travel at a more safe speed. And we're also looking at recently passed legislation, AB 43, which will give cities and counties more authority to set speed limits. So starting to think about whether there are certain areas around schools, parks, senior centers, or transit stations where we might want to think about having a speed limit of 25 miles an hour or even lower. Impaired driving. So this is a huge factor in Sonoma County as well. And so to address impaired driving, we're looking at creating transportation alternatives and preventing folks with a pattern of impaired driving from getting behind the wheel. So here are a few of our actions under this category. We have, help encouraging law enforcement to engage with businesses around responsible beverage service. This is something that some local police departments are already doing, and we'd like to see expanded. We're also proposing to expand transportation services to include more nighttime hours. Nighttime transportation services also benefit people who work irregular hours and seniors who don't feel safe driving at night. And this could take the form of flexible on-demand services, rideshare, things that, new emerging mobility things like VIA, or traditional fixed route bus lines, just having more hours overnight, and even just into the evening. So the next big goal is creating a culture of safety. So this is about instilling a sense of shared responsibility for each other's safety. And many of the actions focus on youth or young drivers to help develop the next generation of responsible road users. And this goal targets dangerous behavior that contributes to all 4 of the top crash factors. I'm not going to go over all of these, but I want to call attention to one big thing we're excited about is potentially, thinking about how we might expand local safe routes to school programs. Again, like we mentioned, creating the next generation of responsible road users. And also, we want to think a lot about promoting anti-distraction messaging among fleet drivers, rental car companies, and younger drivers. And another thing is about, teaching folks how to safely share the road with pedestrians and cyclists, such as, a lot of folks don't realize that as a driver, you're required to yield at marked as well as unmarked crosswalks. Or, you're required to give 3 feet of space whenever you're passing cyclists. So, yeah, this is about education and encouragement and, just building this sense of shared responsibility for each other's safety. The next goal is building and maintaining safe streets for all. This goal is identified as the most important step by 67% of those survey respondents. So basically, we're looking at how to design streets to encourage safe behavior and reduce conflicts between users. So there's dozens of engineering countermeasures that have proven to reduce the quantity and the severity of crashes, ranging from simple things like reflective materials attached to objects that folks are running into, to more complex facilities like raised crosswalks or traffic circles. And so we have a lot of actions under this goal. So I've just included a sampling here. A couple I want to call out is, we're proposing to establish rapid response teams to evaluate and address the sites of fatal and severe injury crashes. And we're also focusing on closing gaps in the bicycle and pedestrian networks and designing facilities for all ages and all abilities. So the fifth goal is about making vehicles safer and reducing private vehicle use. So on the making vehicles safer side, we're looking at pretty simple things like installing these side guards on large trucks, which basically help keep pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorcyclists from being run over by a truck's rear wheels during a side impact collision. And we're also looking at just trying to reduce VMT overall, because the more you can do that, you can just reduce overall exposure to crashes. And so there's a lot of synergy between, climate goals and VMT reduction and Vision Zero. And finally, we're looking at how to improve data for effective decision making. So Sonoma County has already taken a huge step toward improving data with the Vision Zero data dashboard. And as part of this plan, we're looking for ways to further improve that data and to get it into the hands of decision makers. So a big part of that is just about, maintaining and updating the data dashboard, and also looking at new data sources such as citation data, data from hospitals and trauma centers. And finally, helping to train law enforcement officers to produce more detailed and informative crash reports and conduct proper investigations to ensure that we really understand the factors that are behind crashes, particularly for crashes involving pedestrians and cyclists, where sometimes there's some unique elements involved. So what's next? The Vision Zero action plan is really a commitment to an initial set of actions to address the county's highest priority traffic safety issues. So for individuals, we'll be including a Vision Zero pledge where you can commit to safe driving behavior, which I'll share on the next screen. And we're also including a sample resolution for all of the local jurisdictions. So this resolution is, first of all, it's about committing to this work, and it's also about identifying particular goals and actions that are relevant and feasible for each jurisdiction's local context. So as far as tracking, we're currently wrapping up development of some of our tracking tools, but the big picture plan is, we're planning to lean heavily on the existing Vision Zero website and the data dashboard to evaluate our efforts and also to track progress toward meeting these Vision Zero goals. So yes, this is the Vision Zero Safety Pledge. I invite you all to take the pledge at the address you see on the screen. I can share that in the chat as well. And yeah, now I'd like to open it up for questions and comments. I want to say the draft action plan is currently available online, but we are about to be releasing the next draft of the plan on February 7th. So if you want to see the latest and greatest before you get in there and start sending us all of your great comments, that will be released on February 7th. And we'll have a comment period running from then until 21st. So with that, I will stop sharing and welcome any questions.
On the updated plan that will be released February 7th, how can we access that? Will that be on your website?
It'll be on SCTA's website. Yeah.
SCTA's, thank you.
So
yeah, I think Brian was up first and then Steve. Janet, you want me to handle that or are you doing it?
I'm sorry.
I think I had Brian up first and then Steve and then Tom.
Okay.
One quick point, the reference to the side skirts on the trucks, I think that's strictly a DOT situation. And my only reason I bring it up, I just don't see why we should spend consulting time on something that is only in the jurisdiction of the DOT and not any of the cities or counties.
Well, I know that lots of local jurisdictions have imposed rules around implementing the side guards on trucks. So
I had 25 years in the truck manufacturing business, and that's the first I've ever heard of it. So thank you.
yeah, I don't think it's super common. I know I just know of a few jurisdictions that have done it, but
Steve? Bertlebaugh? You're muted, Steve. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I have been involved in over the months in the project, and one of the things that came up several times was the data and the accuracy of the data when we're dealing with police officers that have a lot on their plate, a lot to do. They're writing their reports under pressure, and very often the preliminary report, which is based on, information they can get right away, is the final report. It doesn't get carefully reviewed, and the further investigation doesn't end up in it. So one of the suggestions that's floating out there, and I don't know whether we've adopted it yet, is that we audit reports, maybe every 10th report, to make sure that it's really complete and been adequately prepared so that it feeds proper information into the data. I think we might go even further. We might annually make some awards to police officers that really do a good job on their reports. So that's something down the road that I think we ought to think about. Thank you.
thanks, Steve.
Good comments. Tom and then Mosa.
Thanks. For following on what Steve just said, I was wondering if the rapid response teams idea, which I hadn't paid attention to previously, might support that function a little bit less, more of a collaborative approach with the officers. I realize it's a huge lift to train all the officers to do this, and there's always constantly new officers coming onto the force. But to the extent that the response teams could be sort of collaboratively working on that, it might take some of the burden off the officers as well. So I'm trying to think of it as a positive way of achieving the data quality and policy implementation objectives without sort of a heavy-handed approach. So I look forward to that playing out. The other thing that I like Steve's idea of rewards, where it doesn't have to be recognition goes a long way. And so that might be something to pay attention to. And I just draw our attention to the fact that traffic calming has been part of it was proposed in the 2016 Climate Action 2020 plan as a measure for all the cities to entertain. And there still seems to be a great difficulty in getting policymakers to understand the benefits of traffic calming. We here in Sonoma, we recently had our road diet challenged by some members of our council, and ultimately the protected bike lanes, which would have been the first protected bike lanes in Sonoma County, parking protected bike lanes, were vetoed at the last minute after Caltrans had gone through a tremendous amount of effort to redesign the project to support this, primarily because of aesthetic objections to the bollards that might have been necessary in a few locations. So it was really kind of an under-educated moment in city government, and you can't fault the policymakers. They really they don't have the expertise. But it's a challenge. It's a real challenge.
Thank you, Tom. Mosa, and then Tom Banning afterwards.
Yeah, in fact, I have a question about the crash analysis. Like I did not see a presentation like a map showing where are the locations of the fatal or severe injury accidents, and also did the plan or the document provide specific mitigations, like at each location. I read some recommendation in general terms, and what's the cost of implementation of these programs and who will fund them?
Yes, those are all great questions. So within the plan, so this is the high injury network. So this is, we do have, if you go to the Vision Zero data dashboard, you can actually see a map of every crash that has happened throughout the county in the past 5 years. This network is basically taking that and taking the next step and really identifying the particular locations with the highest incidence of the fatal and severe injury crashes. But on a local jurisdiction level, the best thing to be done in terms of identifying those particular interventions that are appropriate for the corridors and intersections within a given jurisdiction is really to develop those local road safety plans, which really take you through the process of running that analysis on the local level, and also of identifying appropriate countermeasures that can address those particular issues on a location by location basis.
But how will we fund, and what's the cost?
So the local road safety plans, once you complete those, it makes local jurisdictions eligible for HSIP funding, which can be used to not just HSIP funding, but it sets you up for a variety of different funding programs that can be used, but most notably HSIP to fund those types of improvements.
Thank you.
Good question, Mosa. I think we could have a deep dive into how all this stuff might get funded in the future. It sounds complicated, but Tom?
Thank you. Over the years, I've had several opportunities to be driving in Sweden, which you mentioned on page 9, that's a birthplace of Vision Zero. And I can just say they have near perfect infrastructure, and they don't have drunk drivers, and they don't speed. And it's because of the laws and the speed cameras. You mentioned on action item 4.9, automated traffic enforcement, which I think also our Secretary of Transportation talked about that in the context of Vision Zero recently. That's instant controversy, and I think they're effective, but could you expand on how you plan to move forward on that?
Well, we're providing a set of recommendations. As far as each jurisdiction, chooses to take those up or not, and whether it's worth the political capital to move forward with that particular intervention, I think is up to them. But it certainly has been done in a lot of places in the US, and there's a lot of data that demonstrates, like you said, that it is one of the most effective things that can be done to curb speeding. So yeah.
Okay. I'll share one or two Swedish points. Driving there, they have enclosures along the road for the cameras, and they look quite bulletproof. And not all of them have cameras. Some are decoys, and the police go out in the middle of the night and move the cameras around. And so you don't know, and people don't speed. And one of our Swedish friends, the last trip was there, said, and that they never brought up Vision Zero, but he said, do you know how many Swedish kids under 12 died in the country last year as a pedestrian, a cyclist, or a passenger? And he said, 1. And he said, this is a country of 10 million people, by the way. And he said, we view this as a room for improvement. And that's just the mentality they have there. That's all. Thank you.
Good points, Tom. And Quinn, thank you very much. I don't see any other hands, and I'm trying to move it along a little bit because we're getting jammed up. Janet, thank you.
Thank you.
And any final comments, Janet, on this?
No, we really appreciate your feedback. It's been great. I left some links in the chat. And if anybody has any more questions, of course, you can contact me directly.
Great. Thank you, guys. Really interesting report.
Thanks so much.
SB1 Local Partnership Formulaic Program, fiscal year 2021 and 21-22 programming.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Dave Rippert, Assistant Director of Projects and Programming for SCTA. So to give you some background on this, the Senate Bill 1 included a program called a Local Partnership Program that is to incentivize agencies like SCTA to pass self-help transportation sales taxes. And we have our own Measure M. And because of that, we get a share of this local partnership program every fiscal year to use for transportation projects. Back in 2019, this committee recommended to the board that they program about 1.1 million of funding to 2 projects, one for Sonoma County Transit and the other for the city of Petaluma. And unfortunately, neither project has been able to move forward to construction yet. Sonoma County Transit started working on their project and getting the paperwork submitted to the state. However, they withdrew the project in 2020 due to pressing staff needs because of COVID. City of Petaluma has been working on their McDowell Boulevard Police Streets project. However, it's not quite ready for construction, and they are still finishing up the design of that project. Right now, we have about $551,000 of funding that will lapse at the end of this fiscal year on June 30th, unless we put it on a project. And so because of that, staff looked at all of the funding applications that were submitted as part of the 2021 funding program. And we determined the best fit for that funding was the city of Santa Rosa city buses project to replace 7 of their older diesel buses with electric buses. And this is a project that can be phased based on the amount of funding that's available. So for this $550,000, they could replace 1 bus with that funding and be able to move forward with the required paperwork to the state and get that submitted in March and get the funds programmed by June. So the funds would not be lost to the region, and then they'd be able to move forward procurement of that bus next fiscal year. So as part of this recommendation, we're also recommending rescinding the funding from the city of Petaluma's McDowell Boulevard project. This is still the city's #1 priority for funding. We've had ongoing discussions with staff, and we've indicated to them that we will help them try to come up with the funding. We can't make any guarantees at this point, but we plan to come back to this committee and the board later on this year as part of the 2021 funding program to determine how we're going to fund that project, whether it's through the local partnership program or other federal funds. So at this time, our recommendation is that you recommend to the board that you approve the revised programming, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
And real quickly, David, are you looking for action by this committee, or is this just background at this point? You want us to approve? Okay.
Yeah, we're looking for a motion.
Thank you.
In a second.
Just wanted to clarify. Before we get to that, Tom had a question.
Right. Before a motion, I'd like to just ask David, thank you for that presentation. And my understanding is that Petaluma does already have an EV bus, an electric bus, at least one. But I was just curious if you could tell us what this would do to the bus count, comparative bus count for the different cities.
I think I would defer to Dana Teray. She may know the exact number of each buses for the operators.
Yeah, the city of Petaluma doesn't actually have any in operations yet, and neither does Santa Rosa. So Sonoma County Transit is the only operator that currently has electric buses in operation. Santa Rosa has some others on order, so I would have to get back to you to get the total, what this would bring it to for the number of buses on order at Santa Rosa City Bus.
Okay, thanks, Dana. I mixed up Brian Albee saying he had a bus with Santa Rosa City. You're right. So thank you.
I believe Sonoma County Transit has 3 in operations right now.
And I should
Thank you.
mention, as part of the applications we received for the 2021 funding program, we received requests for 7 buses from Santa Rosa, 14 from Sonoma County Transit, and 10 from Petaluma. So all 3 operators are looking to purchase electric buses in the next 5 years.
Thank you, David and Dana. Do we have a motion to approve the
I'll make a
program?
motion. This is Dennis. I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll
Thank you,
second.
Dennis. Tom, second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, raise their hands. Any opposed, raise your hands. And any abstentions? I didn't see any opposition or abstentions. Good job, David and Dana.
Thank you very much.
Always like unanimous votes. Those are always good. Uh-oh, my computer died. We are on to, oh, this is this could be a long one. Who's got capital improvement projects? I watched this last week. Who can sum this up in 1 minute or less, James?
Yeah, you got it. So I can sum it up in 5 seconds by say go to resilient37.org. But let me just share screen. Wait, did I share the right one? Let me hold on a second. Share, and then let's do this share screen here. Share. Okay, so anyone in their browser can just go ahead and type in resilient37.org. It'll redirect you to scta.ca.gov/resilient37. This is your best kind of one-stop shop for all things Highway 37. You'll find that other transportation authorities, including SCTA, as well as Caltrans and MTC, will have some information on their website. This is geared towards a collaboration between what everybody's doing on Highway 37. The 2 public meetings that I wanted to point out and highlight on this agenda are the PEL meeting, which is a planning environmental linkages, which happened last week. There is a link to the event flyer here. If you click on that link to the event flyer, it will then take you to the flyer itself. You can read about the meeting that you saw. When you want to get into the cool stuff, scroll down towards the bottom. It'll take you to the Caltrans website there at the bottom link, which gives you all the details on the planning environmental linkage study. You can go down and you can watch the informative video. You can do a virtual tour about Highway 37. You can do these alignment videos, which show what's happening. And you can watch the full public meeting here as well if you'd like. The highest level summary I can give you very briefly under the public meeting slides that are provided. And it essentially defines for you what is a planning and environmental linkages study. It takes you through the work that they've been doing since December 2020. The last public meeting they had in May 26th takes you through the other milestones, which led to the meeting that they just had last week. And then there's going to be one more big public meeting before this process is finalized. That is going to allow the project to move into, or this planning study to move into CEQA and NEPA documents that will advance the actual projects themselves. It'll no longer be advanced study, it will be a project specific study. Jumping back to the Highway 37 website, the resilient37.org, the meeting on Wednesday will be on the Sears Point to Mare Island Improvement Project. That project has the full meeting announcement as well as a link to the project fact sheet. The project fact sheet gives you the high level limits of the project from Sears Point to Mare Island, as well as goes over the alternatives, which are the movable barrier alternative, followed by essentially 2 different 4-lane alternatives. One would be a part-time, 4th lane or part-time lane. The other one would be basically 2 lanes in each direction all the time. This project is proposing tolling. That will be part of the presentation on Wednesday night. And with that, I will stop sharing screen and pass it back to John.
Yeah, and I know we're strapped for time. I was just so discombobulated the other night watching that PEL meeting, seeing all these different alternative routes. I mean, I guess I lost control of the process for 1 or 2 meetings, and all of a sudden there's 5 more alternative routes being considered. Are we done throwing alternative routes on the board to see if they'll stick?
So the process of the PAL, it's critical that every viable alternative that is recommended, that the public comments on, that wants to move forward with, is evaluated. Initially, they'll be evaluated at a high level, then they'll be narrowed down, refined, analyzed at a lower level, and then ultimately there'll be alternatives that will move into those project-specific environmental documents. There was 7 alternatives just prior to the PEL meeting. Bay Area Conservation Development, BCDC, they actually added an 8th alternative that got discussed at the meeting that there was not a flyover for. Since then, I believe they are working on developing a flyover for that alternative. So I can't guarantee you we're done at 8, but I can say that you can reach out to Caltrans and recommend a 9th alignment, that if you think that's the one, they will consider it. They really want to make sure that they're fully vetting everything from US 101 to Highway 80, and they need to consider these whatever the comments are. So that's where we're at. Ideally, those alternatives will be narrowed down come middle of next summer.
Thank you for your very brief and succinct report. Appreciate it. A lot of information there. We are on to transition of projects and funding, which we talked a little bit about for Measure M to Go Sonoma.
So these 2 items, the next 2 items were actually covered by Shauna as part of the annual report out. So I think we're good there, but through the chair, if there's any questions, Shauna and I are both available.
I see none. So we're on to the draft, which is included in your packet of the next Board of Directors agenda.
I'm pulling it up right now. Oh. Here we go. Can we see that?
Yes.
Yeah. Is that too small now? Okay, so here's the regular calendar for the board meeting on February 14 for the committee's interest.
Thank you, Drew. Anybody have any comment on that agenda? If not, we're on to announcements. And seeing no hands raised, we are adjourned, only 2 minutes late. Not bad, guys. Thank you very much. See you guys next month.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Good job.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Dennis Harder, it has been a pleasure. Until next time. It'll be a while. I'm going to keep calling you Chair.